Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening. Welcome back to Too Late for Me's Gaming Tea Shop Talk. This is my second episode of the podcast where I talk about games, movies, media, etc., things I've been watching or doing just for my own amusement. And to get right into the quick of it, we are going to talk about, let me type it in. And the big reveal is James Bond movies. So, I'm a huge James Bond fan. I love all things James Bond. My grandfather, when I was just a wee lad, showed me as many James Bond movies as he can cram into my head that my mom would allow and that my sleepy eyes could take. And ever since then, I've always had a love for James Bond. All things cool and spy and suave and handsome and cold-blooded. It was just a delight. Some past few months ago, I had the chance to buy the James Bond collection. I forget the quite name of it, but it's the newer of the 24 movie box set. And I got it for relatively cheap. I think I got it for like 30 bucks, 30, 40 bucks. It was on deep discount for whatever reason. I can't quite remember. If I do remember, I'll throw it in here, but suffice to say, I don't remember. And over the course of a month, through 48 hours, not straight, but over the course of 1 month, so 4 weeks and some change, I watched every single James Bond movie in that collection, minus the 25th and final James Bond movie, as there is no sequel to that just yet, or soft reboot to the timeline, what have you. And I had a blast, honestly. I was so enamored the whole time. I have never in my life sat down and done such a deep movie marathon before. Truly, it was quite an experience. One I don't think I'm gonna have again anytime soon, but if I ever get the chance to watch a set of movies like that again and write down my thoughts, I could see myself really getting heavily invested in such things like maybe the Columbo or Zatoichi films, or other big famous box sets that people love. Yeah, it was something, truly. But unfortunately, by the time I was done, my brain was kind of fried, so I needed a long while to digest my feelings. And I'm talking like, I don't know, 2 to 3 months. It's been some time since I finished my marathon. And while I was sitting down gestating it, I thought to myself, why don't I make a tiered video list about it? Talking about my feelings and such, so I can have for myself in the future when I want to reference it, or just because I think it's a cool activity to do. I'd love to sit here and go through each film like meticulously and talk about every single thing possible in it and everything in the collection, but I don't have the time to do that. So it's just going to be about 40-50 minute-ish kind of summary of my feelings, thoughts, and why I placed them where I placed them. So we're going to boot this guy up here. And this is our tier list. So as you can see, we have categories S through F. I thought about making quirky categories like, most amazing or absolute garbage. But to keep it simple, so it's very much readable, I just stuck with the standard S through F rankings. So with that out the way, let's get it started with Dr. No, the first James Bond film. Filmed in 1962 by Terrence Young, it is the first James Bond film in the series, starring the amazing and incredible Sean Connery. Sean Connery is the first Bond and one who really set the tone for the series going forward. He is suave, a cold-blooded killer, thoughtful in, his killing spy ways, and he's pretty good at his job too. It was such a joy seeing Sean Connery's first role in James Bond because he really killed it. So I have the wiki open, and to give a small summary of the film, uh, the film was produced by Harry Saltzman and Albert R. Broccoli of Eon Productions. Blah blah blah. In the film, James Bond is sent to Jamaica to investigate the disappearance of a fellow British agent. The trail leads him to the underground base of Dr. No, who is plotting to disrupt an American space launch from Cape Canaveral with a radio beam weapon. And also, I had my thoughts documented as I was watching through the James Bond films, but unfortunately for the first 9 films, I really didn't think I was going to be doing such a thing, so I didn't really write down much. But I put Dr. No as I finished watching Dr. No and all the extras, which were great. The extras in Dr. No were amazing. I recommend them. The extras from then on don't really quite live up to what's in Dr. No from the rest of the films. Some of them have really good extras and special effects and, you know, making of and documentaries and interviews. Some of them have jack all, which is unfortunate. Like Skyfall and Spectre don't really have much, and they don't also follow the format of the rest of the movies or the look of the discs either. But yes, I put the film still holds up. A wonderful 7 out of 10 movie in 2025. But back in the 1960s, this would have easily been an 11 out of 10 Dr. No. And for my own personal ranking, I have a list of how I rank the James Bond films as I watched them. And after watching all the films, Dr. No sits basically in the middle at number 13 out of 24. Well, 25 technically, but I'm not including No Time to Die in this list I have in front of me on my phone. There's No Time to Die separate because it wasn't part of the collection. So the collection is what I'm going to talk about first, and then No Time to Die, which is not in the collection, you know, it's there. So going based off my feelings, and I didn't go back to watch the films again. I only watched them all once, and using my memories, the wiki summary, and just my general feelings, I like Dr. No. I thought it was cool, and I thought if I would have seen this as a kid in the 1960s, I would have been blown away. I only really have one problem in the movie, even though everything else in the film is great from a 1960s perspective. For a long while, I thought Dr. No got away, because in the ending sequence, when he and James are fighting, I didn't recognize that was him in the suit. I thought it was just a random goon who went up to attack James and then got thrown into the, you know, murder water, whatever it was, battery acid, who cares? I didn't know that, so that made me feel kind of bad. If it was telegraphed very well on screen, then I guess I didn't do a good job of noticing it. But for my eyes, I was paying attention, but I just didn't catch it. So that made me feel kind of like whatever happened to Dr. No, when the film pretty spells it out, like, yeah, Dr. No was, you know, he got. And unfortunately, the Bond girl for the film, I don't quite remember, but the film says it was. I remember it was a lady with she was in a swimsuit. They meet Honey Rider, a shell diver. Honey Rider, cool Bond girl. She was digging for shells and being kind of quirky, and James shows affection for her as they go on through Dr. No's island. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought she was pretty cool. You know, solid Bond girl. But all in all, based on my list and how I feel, I'm gonna put Dr. No in solid C. If I didn't see all the films, it would list at B, but for now, it's a solid C, you know. I don't want to harp on it, but I also think because it's the first and it has to establish a lot of ground first, it didn't have time to really do a lot, you know. So next on the list, we have From Russia with Love, the second James Bond film. And the plot summary of From Russia with Love is... In the film, Bond is sent to assist in the defection of Soviet consulate clerk Tatiana Romanov in Turkey, where Spectre plans to avenge Bond's killing of Dr. No. So, in my review summary, I wrote, got to finish From Russia with Love, a solid 8 out of 10 movie in 2025. Would have been a 12 out of 10 in the 1960s. besides the wild sexism and objectification of women beyond comical level, it's very good still. So, I don't know why sexism was that bad in the 1960s. It gets particularly bad in the James Bond films of all things. And James Bond isn't exactly the world's most, isn't a huge feminist to start with. Women are just kind of things to him for a couple of times, which is very sad to see. But as for the plot of the film, I really thought it was cool when I was watching it. Unfortunately, it's not like super embedded in my head. I'm reading the plot summary, right now. And yeah, some of this makes sense. Tatiana is the Bond girl. They're trying to, defect her. And, they eventually get away. And they have cool boat adventures and they have fun. I thought it was pretty good. In my rankings, I listed it as From Russia with Love, 8 out of 24. So, pretty solid B. Put up where it be. I think Tatiana was a cool Bond girl as well. I wish I had more to say about it, but again, the first 9 films, I really didn't store in a part of my brain. I just kind of went for it, okay, I'm just gonna watch these films and enjoy myself. It wasn't until film 9 when I really started going, I should be paying more attention and studying this instead of just passively watching it. Because you do that sometimes when you're watching films. You just kind of passively enjoy them without really thinking about, hey, what was the meaning of this? So kicking off at the 3rd Bond film, Goldfinger. Once again, starring Sean Connery, as well as From Russia with Love was also Sean Connery. And the plot summary is, the film's plot has Bond investigating the gold magnate Ulrich Goldfinger, who plans to contaminate the United States bullion depository at Fort Knox. So, going off of my feelings without looking at my summary, I didn't like the film itself that much. I thought the plot was a little bit silly. Oh no, our gold is going to be tampered with, and then we're going to have to rely on Goldfinger's gold because we can't touch our gold. It's going to be irradiated or whatever. I thought that was okay. It seemed very American for a James Bond film, which are kind of supposed to be kind of UK focused. He's in America a lot, but it's very American focused films, which is not what I thought the start with the series is going to be. Going on to my summary, I've put Finish Goldfinger, a very silly movie. Definitely more action than a spy movie. Odd Job effing owns, and James Bond is so incompetent at times, it's hilarious. And I recall that being true. James kind of blunders around a couple of times and getting owned by Odd Job a lot. I don't even remember the Bond girl for the film. Who was it? Cast. Pussy Galore. Yeah, great name, but kind of something I should talk about as well are the villains in the movies, because I'm definitely glossing over that as I'm just trying to quickly rapid fire my thoughts. I don't have a script. This is all freeform. I thought Dr. No, I thought he was a great villain. I thought his design was great. I thought his motivation was cool. From Russia with Love, I don't really remember the villain. Let me double check who the villain was. Spectre number 3, Donald Grant. Yeah. Sylvia's. Yeah, no one is really speaking out. I think it was probably Blofeld who isn't credited yet as Blofeld, but I'm pretty sure it was Blofeld as the villain. And Goldfinger has the villain of Goldfinger. He's the villain. I really didn't find him all that cool. I thought the intro was nice where, Bond gets one over Goldfinger and, he gets revenge by dipping one of his agent, co-workers in gold and going, this is what happens when you cross me. I love gold. Yeah, I thought most of the film was pretty actiony, but very silly at the same time. I was more interested in Odd Job because Odd Job was awesome. He's in top spot for henchmen in Bond films because he definitely kicks ass. Not many henchmen in the Bond films really stand out to me, besides a couple, but Odd Job's definitely one of them. As for where I placed it in my rankings out of 24, after watching all the films, I put Goldfinger in number 19 out of 24. And I know people love Goldfinger. They think the plot is great, but I have different thoughts on the Bond series after going through them all in a row with my thoughts like very hyper focused as I'm going through them one after the other and noticing very specifically what they do good and what they do bad. So unfortunately, Goldfinger gets a D from me. I wouldn't call it horrendous, but it just didn't do it for me. On top of the wild sexism, on top of the American focused plot, on top of the villain who I really don't like. The only thing that really I liked was the action bits and Oddjob, because James is not really selling himself as a amazing spy man. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And Sean Connery, he does a great job, but that's what he was given. Moving on to Thunderball. Reading the summary, yada yada yada. It is the third and final Bond film to be directed by Terrence Young with a screenplay by Richard Mallbaum and John Hopkins. The film follows Bond's mission to find 2 NATO atomic bombs stolen by Spectre, which holds the world ransom to the tune of 100 million euros in diamonds under the threat of destroying an unspecified metropolis in either the United Kingdom or the United States. Later to be revealed, Miami. The search leads Bond to the Bahamas, where he encounters Emilio Largo, the card-playing, eye-patch-wearing Spectre number 2, backed by CIA agent Felix Leiter, Largo's mistress, Domino Derval. Bond's search culminates in an underwater battle with all Largo's henchmen. So, yeah, I really liked watching Thunderball. I thought that number 2 was really cool. I thought that Spectre was a cool organization. I thought Felix was great. I love Felix. I think Domino's pretty cool. Domino's, she's an iconic Bond villainess girl-ish. I think she's a Bond girl by classification. I thought she was kind of cool. I wasn't in love with her, but thought she was cool. And my summary: got to finish watching Thunderball today. A better, slightly more serious James Bond film with a little less jokes about women. It's about as good as From Russia with Love, in my honest opinion, because the silliness of Goldfinger definitely made the series at the point seem like they gave up on being a spy thriller and being more actiony. So, I thought Thunderball was really cool. And looking at my rankings, Thunderball listed as... I think Thunderball's a good film. It oddly sits at number 16, which... I think 16 upwards, they're all very watchable films. I think at a certain point past 16, they stop getting for watchable pleasure, more for the collection. So honestly, I want to put Thunderball right next to Dr. No as a C. Based on my list, because this is how I felt after the whole thing. Thinking about it in my memory, I feel pretty good about it, but the list is what it is. Can't be too mad at it. Moving on, You Only Live Twice, the 5th James Bond film. Once again, starring Sean Connery. It is the first 3 Bond films to be directed by Lewis Gilbert. In the film, Bond is dispatched to Japan after American and Soviet crew spacecraft vanish mysteriously in orbit, each nation blaming the other amidst the Cold War. Bond travels secretly to the remote Japanese field to find the perpetrators and comes face to face with Ernest Stavro Blofeld, the head of Spectre. The film reveals the appearance of Blofeld, who was previously unseen Spectre working for the government of an unnamed Asian power, implied to be China, to provoke war between the superpowers. And I thought You Only Live Twice was pretty cool. It's in the reaches of my memory as slightly more memorable than something like Goldfinger's detailed plots or From Russia with Love, even though it sits at a B, which is confusing me, but that's what my list says. But I do remember the plot, they're having cool special effects and Spectre's spaceships eating other spaceships and then coming back and hiding them away, and America and who was it, Russia blaming each other and going, you killed our guys. No, you killed our guys, we don't trust you. Well, we don't trust you. I thought that was pretty cool. And, Blofeld being, revealed to be the big bad finally. Great reveal. It's certainly better than other Bond villains at the time, which I thought were cool. but you know, he stood out particularly. In my summary, I wrote, "Finished You Only Live Twice," for the film that finally shows the head of Spectre and is the end of the original Sean Connery run, and takes place in Japan. James Bond films love Asia and Asians, and has extremely high production values for the time. It's alright. Didn't quite spark the neurons that Thunderball, despite World War III being how high the stakes are in this film. So, you know, that kind of sums it up. I put You Only Live Twice in... Ooh, I put it in number 21 out of 24. So, I honestly still don't think it's an F, but I do think it's definitely below Goldfinger. So, that's where it sits on my list, unfortunately. So, sorry, original Sean Connery run. You aren't batting particularly high. 1B, 2 C's, and 2 D's. You know, it kind of shows what kind of person I am from what I like. Because I remember really liking From Russia with Love, but I can't articulate why the second. Moving on from there, we have On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the first and only George Lazenby film. It is based on a 1963 novel by Ian Fleming following Sean Connery's decision to retire from the role after You Only Live Twice. Eon selected George Lazenby, a model with no prior acting credits, to play the part of James Bond. During the filming, Lazenby announced he would only play the role of Bond once. Connery returned to portray Bond in 1971's Diamonds Are Forever. So that's jumping the gun a bit. In the film, Bond faces Blofeld, who is planning to hold the world ransom by threatening to render all food, plants, and livestock infertile through the actions of a group that brainwash angels of death. Along the way, Bond meets and falls in love with, and eventually marries, Contessa Teresa de Venzo. So, let's just get this out the way. F. On my list, out of 24 films, it's number 23. We aren't going to get to number 24 for a long, long while, but I did not like the film. I thought George Lazenby was a very handsome-looking Bond. I thought the film's plot was, on paper, good, but honestly, the approach they took while filming it was very slow. And the opening is terrible, and they use a lot of cuts where James throws a guy over his shoulder 3 times, using the same cut over and over again, and then he saves a girl, but then she steals his vehicle. And his next line following that is, "This wouldn't have happened to the other guy," implying that he's already a lesser James Bond than Sean Connery, which sucks. Like, why would you write that? George did not deserve that. Like, no wonder he announced, like, "Oh, I don't want to play James Bond if they're going to treat me like this and give me this kind of script to work with." Whereas all other Sean Connery films kind of rocked from plot perspective. It's kind of sad, honestly. I don't think George should have gotten that kind of raw deal. He got done kind of dirty. So, oh, and I know this is in the middle of we're in the list, but I'm not gonna talk about every single James Bond theme. I'm not gonna talk about every single James Bond girl in detail, and I'm not gonna talk about every single James Bond villain in detail. I'm just gonna do my best to talk about the plots as I remember, as I see in the wiki, and you know, as I have in my list and what I wrote down. Because otherwise this video would be way too long, and I don't have the emotional bandwidth or time or resources to dedicate that much to this. Honestly, I've been thinking about doing this video for months and months, and I decided we'll just freeball it, you know, do it as is. And this is the best we're gonna do. So, without the way, we're moving on to Diamonds Are Forever, the 7th James Bond film and the 6th and final film to star Sean Connery, returned as James Bond. The film is based on Ian Fleming's 1956 novel and is the second of 4 Bond films directed by Guy Hamilton. The story has Bond impersonating a diamond smuggler to infiltrate a diamond smuggling ring and uncovering a plot by his old enemy, Ernesto Blofeld. To use the diamonds to build a space laser weapon, Bond sets out to stop the smuggling, but he discovers that he must defeat Blofeld before he destroys Washington, D.C. in a plan to blackmail the world with nuclear supremacy. So, I really, really like Diamonds Are Forever. Like, I like it a lot, honestly. In my summary, scrolling up to it. Oh, I also forgot to read the my plot summary of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So let me get that out of the way real quick. Finished On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Didn't like it at all, but at least I know that it's not the fault of George Lazenby. It's the fault of the direction and adhering very closely to the books to his own detriment. The ending was very good, however. It's so good it makes Start of Diamonds Are Forever even better. And rolling right into it, finished Diamonds Are Forever. Extremely good Bond film, and it should be held as a standard for Bond filming when referring to the classic films. It's funny, fun, well-paced, great action, sets, and an overall fantastic watch. If not for the still sexist bits, I'd give it a 10 out of 10 for a Bond movie. They turned the rock that was on Her Majesty's Secret Service into a diamond, all right. So, I got a little poetic at the end, but that just goes to show how much I loved it. And I'm going to give Diamonds Are Forever an A, because I still remember how much I loved it, and I like how the movie was well-paced, and all the other things I said. I think it straddled every single line perfectly, being a spy film, a funny film, an action film, everything. And I like the Bond girls, and I like Ernest Blofeld, showing up again. And I like it's the quintessential Sean Connery role for me. He did it the best. And in my final listing, I gave it the 4th spot out of 24. So, pretty good film, honestly. Next on the list, we have Live and Let Die. It is the first Roger Moore film. Made in 1973, the 8th James Bond film, 3rd in the series, directed by Guy Hamilton. It is based on Ian Fleming's 1954 novel. The storyline involves a drug lord in Harlem, New York City, known as Mr. Big, who plans to distribute 2 tons of heroin for free to put rival drug lords out of business and then become a monopoly supplier. Mr. Big is revealed to be the alter ego of Dr. Kanaga, a corrupt Caribbean dictator who rules San Monique, a fictional island where opium poppies are secretly farmed. Bond is investigating the deaths of 3 British agents, leading him to Kanaga, and he is soon trapped in a world of gangsters and voodoo as he fights to put a stop to Kanaga's scheme. So, I'm going to tell you what I wrote as my summary. Finish Live and Let Die. Very funny and silly movie. Basically, James Bond versus the black community is real. I don't know how I rate it, but it's definitely on the good scale, and it's not like dry like other Bond films. Probably like a little below From Russia with Love currently, so it's 3rd best Bond film in this watch through. And on my list, I put Live and Let Die as number 12, so sitting perfectly in the middle, like right in the middle, and I would give it a B. Slightly above, Dr. No, and it just barely hits like B. I might throw this down to C depending on how I feel, but I don't think B is going to be too populated. C's and D's, you guys are going to be full by the time we end. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I thought Live and Let Die was pretty funny. I don't like how they made women, kind of incompetent at times. The main Bond girl, she kind of gets killed off pretty easily. What I really remember is Baron Saturday, aka Baron Samaldi, but translated it's just Baron Saturday, the immortal voodoo man. He's a great part of the film. Mr. Big's okay, he's the main villain, but he mainly just menaces Bond for most of the movie and threatens him with guns and gangsters in the black community. And James Bond versus Harlem, aka the black community, is pretty funny as a concept. So I liked it. I thought it was funny. So moving on from there, we have The Man with the Golden Gun. It is a 1974 film, the 9th in James Bond series, produced by Eon Productions, and a 2nd star Roger Moore. Blah 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 blah. The film has Bond sent after Soltex Agitator, a breakthrough technological solution to the contemporary energy shortages, while in a game of cat and mouse facing the assassin Francisco Scaramanga, the man with the golden gun. The action culminates in a duel between them that settles the fate of Solex. So, I didn't like The Man with the Golden Gun, honestly. It was okay, I guess. I'm furiously scanning my Rakins, and I'm trying to figure out where I put it. Oh yeah, I put it near the bottom. I was like, where is it? Where is it? I have to scroll all the way down to the bottom. Out of 24 films, I placed it at 22. So it bats slightly higher than On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but I didn't like the film. I didn't like it at all, honestly. I thought Scaramanga was cool. I thought Knick Knack was cool. And I thought the ending was pretty cool. Everything else in the film was not cool. Let's read what I wrote. And this is since this is the ninth James Bond film, this is where I really start like putting more details into my summaries. Finish The Man with the Golden Gun, the ninth James Bond movie. At first I was thinking it would be ranked 4th out of the 9 I've seen, but now it's at number 8. Reason being is they took the silly bits from Live and Let Die and turned them up with some extra racism and sexist bits that weren't at all present before, like being really mean to the main female character and painting her as incredibly incompetent, or the loud American reappearing where he shouldn't as a gag and being very racist. At the very least, Scaramanga and Knick Knack, the villains, are very fun and know exactly what they are in the movie, but without them, it would be just as dire as on Her Majesty's Secret Service in terms of plot. So, that pretty much says it. I don't really know what more to add. I thought the sexism and racism were really out of control. That's why I really didn't like it. I was like, why is it so mean to like women and everyone who's not white? I don't get it. But moving on, we're going to The Spy Who Loved Me, a 1997 spy film, the 10th James Bond movie produced by Eon Productions, the third to star Roger Moore as a fictional secret agent James Bond. The film takes its title from Ian Fleming's 1962 novel, The Spy Who Loved Me, the 10th book in the James Bond series. Though it does not contain any elements of the novel's plot, the storyline involves a reclusive megalomaniac named Karl Stromberg who plans to destroy the world and create a new civilization under the sea. Bond teams up with Soviet agent Anya Asimov to stop Stromberg, all while being hunted by Stromberg's powerful henchman, Jaws. So, I love this film. This film owned. It was great. It was intense. I love Jaws. I love Stromberg. I love Asimov. She was great. And I liked Roger Moore in this film, and I love the direction and scenes and how they really frame things. It was great. And the underwater sea base at the end, like, we're in the future now, but that was so classic Bond to me. Like, oh yeah, he's gonna go to a secret base where they're doing all kinds of evil stuff. You know, he's got to stop the bad guys. He's such a cool, overpowered hero guy. You know, I thought it was great. On my list out of 24, I ranked it number 9. And it's not number 9 because, like, oh, you know, I just thought it sat there. It's number 9 because it just kept getting pushed down by more and more impressive Bond films. You know, Diamonds Are Forever still holding the 4th spot. From Rush with Love still holding the 8th spot. But I'm not gonna adhere strictly to this list when how I feel about this movie. I'm gonna put The Spy Who Loved Me. Move. The Spy Who Loved Me goes above From Rush with Love. I like Jaws that much. Jaws sold the movie for me, full stop. He is the best Bond henchman of all time. He is so beautiful. He is such a character. Oh my God. Richard Kiel, beautiful man. Beautiful, beautiful man. His subplot is hilarious. He wasn't originally going to make it out of the movie, but everyone loved him so much. They were like, yo, we got to keep this guy around. He's got to keep coming back. I loved it. I loved it so much. Moving on, we have Moonraker, a 1979 spy film, the 11th in James Bond series, 4th to star Roger Moore as James Bond. In the film, Bond investigates the vanishing of a space shuttle orbiter, leading him to Hugo Drax, the owner of the shuttle's manufacturing firm, along with the astronaut Dr. Holly Goodhead. Very funny name. Bond follows the mystery from California to Venice, Rio de Janeiro, and the Amazon rainforest, and finally into outer space to prevent a plot to wipe out the world population and repopulate it with the master race. So, straight up, Moonraker, my 5th favorite Bond film. And before I even get to anything else, I want to put it top spotted B. Like, it's hard to... It is number 5 on my list out of 24, and it's just slightly below Diamonds Are Forever. It would be an A, because how great Jaws is. But A is going to belong to 3 spots, and S belongs to 1 spot. So Moonraker, unfortunately, by my own rules, you gotta sit in the top of B. I'm sorry, but I loved it so much. It was so much fun. I would I would take someone out to a date to see it. I know I forgot it, but I'm gonna also give the summary for The Spy Who Loved Me. Finished watching The Spy Who Loved Me, the 10th James Bond film. Vast improvement over The Man with the Golden Gun. James is allowed to have his brain cells back, women aren't treated like morons, the stakes are incredibly high, and the villains are so good. Effing Jaws the GOAT, that's my guy, WTF. And then moving right along, finished Moonraker, the 11th James Bond film. I think this is my new number 2 straight up. It's less sexist, more action, silly in the right ways, great villains who are cartoonishly evil, basically Hitler. Jaws is there a lot more, 10 out of 10. Exciting action that had me on edge. Everything was great. This is such a good AF movie. It's a perfect movie night movie. I don't know what more I can say. I love Jaws. I love how he got away at the end and was able to lead a happy life. I love how Hugo Drax is unbelievably cartoonishly evil. I love how the action climax of the film was Star Wars, because they saw Star Wars and went, hey, we can do that too. It's hilarious. I don't know what they're thinking, but it's a beautiful movie all the same. Moving on, we have For Your Eyes Only, a 1981 spy film, the 12th in the James Bond franchise, and the 5th to star Roger Moore as James Bond. Blah blah. The film follows Bond as he attempts to locate a missile command system while becoming tangled in web of deception spun by rival Greek smugglers along the way with Melina Havelock, a woman seeking to avenge the murder of her parents. Blah blah. I don't quite remember how I felt about For Your Eyes Only, but I know my summary and how I ranked it. But this has the longest summary by far, so I'm glad I don't have to remember it. I can just rely on my past self to say what I said. So, finished For Your Eyes Only, the 12th James Bond film, the first Bond of the 80s despite retaining that 70s vibe. This is the first Bond without M because the actor passed away, but they didn't recast him just yet, so he's on vacation in the film. This is the first James Bond film that's just a James Bond shaped movie with no real new ideas, but you go to see it every few years and have a good time. Nothing particularly stood out to me honestly coming off the ride that was Moonraker. Even if you're a hater, you won't disagree that the stakes of Ultra Hitler and going to space are pretty high to have come down from. The intro is what I have the most to say about the film. It has a James Bond movie opening down to a science now. Either you start the conflict brewing that sets up the plot of the film, and then go to that with what James is doing, or vice versa. They lead with James having another old age conflict with his arch nemesis that opens on reference from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which I like they didn't forget still. What I don't like is how the plot of the movie is kicked off by the most bumbling and accidental seeming event, and it just kind of goes down from there in a race to who gets in MacGuffin first and either sell it to Russia or is retrieved by MI6. All in all, I wasn't offended, and it did try, so I feel it's a 6 out of 10 movie you view in a marathon that supplements the rest. 12 out of 24 movies done. It's so funny how this is officially the halfway point, and I'm already like, yep, it's now in the 007 modern territory. And where I put For Your Eyes Only is number 18 out of 24. So, you're in the D spot. I'm sorry. Like, you're not F worthy. I think F worthy is, say for like 5 spots, maybe 4. So you sit at the bottom of D for now. But I didn't like how it was mainly James Bond shaped. I personally don't remember the plot of the film. That's how bad it is. I don't remember the Bond girl. I don't really remember the movie. I just remember there being a MacGuffin that, we have to get this thing back. Oh, I think I remember now. A ship got sunk and they're trying to get the thing in it. And either Russia's going to get it and buy it from a guy, or either MI6 is going to get it back. And I remember that scene being good. They had like a lot of cool special effects. But otherwise, that's what happens when you are 18 out of 24. Moving on, we have Octopussy, the movie with a very famous and funny name. Octopussy is a 1983 spy film and a 13th in James Bond series produced by Eon Productions. It is a 6th star Roger Moore as MI6 agent James Bond. The film's title is taken from a short story in Ian Fleming's 1966 short stories collection Octopussy and the Living Daylights. Although the events of Octopussy's short story form part of the title and the character's background, the film's plot is mostly original. It does, however, contain a scene adapted from the Ian Fleming short story Property of a Lady. In Octopussy, Bond is assigned the task of hunting a megalomaniac Soviet general who is stealing jewelry and art objects from the Kremlin art repository. This leads Bond to the exiled Afghan prince Kamal Khan and his associate Octopussy, and the discovery of a plot to force disarmament in Western Europe with the use of a nuclear weapon. Aside from laughing at the name, I don't recall much of Octopussy. I think I recall some of it, but I just kind of recall them hanging out in a mansion, sort of, and kind of like menacing each other for a while. Let's go to how I felt about it in my summary. Finish Octopussy, the 13th James Bond film. I was ready to throw it under for your eyes only and call it a day. But I was actually surprised how I picked up in the second half of the movie. The stakes being low at first with only a vague hint of more and Bond sort of fumbling around were losing me. Not fast, but my attention was waning. However, the introduction of the titular Octopussy marked the start of the film regaining its steam. The entire action sequence after Bond finishes being a good sneaky spot for once and kicks off the action sequence that doesn't let up until the end. I was extremely tense during it somehow. I do have the same problems with the movie I do with a lot of Bond films and how randomly sexist they are. The words gender discrimination actually leaves Bond's effing mouth upon hearing he's not allowed on the island of women. But at the very least, Octopussy herself is a strong lead for most of her time on the screen. So reading my summary, I do kind of remember it now. And I remember Octopussy herself, and I remember the Island of Women, and I remember the climax after they're on. I thought that was really cool. Going into where I put it on my rankings, I put it on 24. No, I put it 14th out of 24. So it's below Dr. No, but you know, above Thunderball. And I really do recall liking Octopussy herself. She was cool. I liked the like poison aesthetic that was, you know, kind of going throughout the film. So let's move on to A View to Kill. Roger Moore, the 7th and final appearance of Roger Moore, a 1985 spy film and the 14th in James Bond series. In A View to Kill, Bond is pitted against Max Zorin, who plans to destroy California's Silicon Valley. So it's funny how brief the description is in the wiki, and I kind of remember the plot of A View to Kill a little bit, not too much, but I remember it. Starting off with my rankings first, I put A View to Kill in 20 out of 24, so below Goldfinger somehow, but above The Man with the Golden Gun and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So it's either at the top of F or at the bottom of D. I don't know. I think I'm going to put it at the top of F, honestly. Because Max Zorin, I believe he was Christopher Walken, and that was cool. I recall the female villain. She was really cool. I forget her name. Let me look it up. Grace Jones as Mayday, Zorin's lover and chief henchwoman. Mayday was really cool. She was a badass black woman, and I believe she kicked James Bond ass a few times. I was kind of hooting and hollering during that part. I was cheering for her more than anyone else in the film because she was just so cool. So let's read my summary. Finish the 14th James Bond film, A View to Kill. Struggling to think of something to say about it. The opening's down pat of what 007 is, so nothing new there. The initial stakes being horse racing and microchips is alright. The ending stakes being a villain plan for having a monopoly on making microchips, so he wants to destroy the Silicon Valley. Okay, man. The movie was more interesting when it was about rigging horse races. The action scenes were nice. I liked Mayday. I liked Mayday's wholly unnecessary sacrifice. I like how effing Stacy, who is by all means a normal civilian along for the effed up ride, is allowed to come along. Something I've noticed in the last two Roger Moore's films is how the top henchmen / henchwomen are more interesting than their employer. I would hope that they'd be equal. I'd hope that they'd be equal, or the boss would be the main draw, but it's been tilted towards the head goon, and I don't think that lends itself to a strong finale. So, it is what it is. It's unfortunate. Moving on, we have The Living Daylights. The first film to star Timothy Dalton. The Living Daylights is a 1987 film, the 15th entry in a James Bond series produced by Eon Productions. The first of two to star Timothy Dalton as James Bond. let's see. The plot isn't like summarized very succinctly in the wiki, so I'm just gonna skim over it, kinda. James Bond, training exercise in Gibraltar. During exercise, an assassin kills 004 and several British military personnel. Bond manages to chase down an assassin who dies after a vehicle chase. And sometime later, Bond is assigned to help KGB General Koskov defect to the West, acting as a counter sniper, covering his escape from a concert hall in Czechoslovakia. So, as the introduction to Timothy Dalton, I thought it was pretty cool. I liked how he was a more ruthless James Bond. I really liked how he was more than willing to be a rogue agent. This is the first time you ever see James Bond like go for it. He's like, no, my authority, how I feel. I'm going to use my license to kill. I'm going to brandish it. And it's the first time in the film where Q notes that a license to kill is also a license to not kill. And also something I haven't brought up, you know, Q is very consistent in all the films and he's great. But yeah, let's read the summary I wrote. Finished Living Daylights, the 15th Bond film. I kind of love Timothy Dalton. He's extremely handsome as James, and I think if I saw his films during the release, I would be a huge fan. He carries himself so well, and he's definitely more of a leader than a soldier that Bond falls into. He also goes the entire movie without using his dick to solve any problems, and doesn't really go out of his way to drink, which is really cool. With that out of the way, the film itself has highs and lows, which I think are all within reasonable bounds. I think the supporting cast do a good job propping up Bond, but don't really get to shine on their own. The conflict being hunting down for a defector, and then trying to stop a Russian general from hunting down spies because he feels like it, but it's a fake plot because he's a fake defector, so he could send James on a murderous wild goose chase for a bit, is a bit convoluted. I will say at least the film takes itself seriously, so I'm not taken out of it. I'm more along for the ride. The action was pretty great. James in his car was probably my highlight. So going on to my rankings, I put The Living Daylights at number 17. So above for Your Eyes Only. Solid D. I feel sad putting in a D considering, you know, I really like Timothy Dalton, but it is what it is. And, you know, we got to move on. So moving on, License to Kill. A 1989 spy film, the 16th James Bond movie, second starring Timothy Dalton. In the film, Bond resigns from MI6 in order to take revenge against the drug lord Franz Sanchez, who ordered an attack against Bond's friend and CIA agent Felix Leiter and the murder of Felix's wife after the wedding. So now that we're deep in, you know, 16 out of 24 films, we can like move away from some of the pretenses. I think License to Kill is pretty cool. I put it number 6 out of 24. So above Russia with Love, above Rush with Love, but below The Spy Who Loved Me, I think. No, not that. Yes. And let's read the summary that I put for it. Finished watching License to Kill, the 16th James Bond film. Holy effing S. Very excellent film. It's got to be in the top 3. This is the Smash Bros of, you want action? Here's your action. Eat up, piggy. I'm usually thinking in the back of my mind how noticeably the formula is since I'm doing a marathon, and only the really great ones stand out when they do something different, and this one is a lot different. I want to gush about all the cool shit, but I'll just put it simply and say this is a wonderful film, and that Timothy Dalton got to close out on a good one. James Bond going rogue and out for the most revenge for the first time in the series is done right. He's pissed, and honestly, I wish he was even more pissed because sometimes the tone isn't 1-to-1, but it's strong still. So, excellent, you know? Timothy Dalton killed it. I felt really good about it. Next up is GoldenEye, the first Pierce Brosnan film. A 1995 action film and the 17th in the James Bond series, produced by Eon Productions. First to star Pierce Brosnan. The story was conceived and written by Michael France, with latter collaboration from other writers. In the film, Bond fights to prevent rogue MI6 agent Alex Trevelyan from using a satellite weapon against London to cause a global financial collapse. I think Pierce Brosnan is de facto like the most like Bond in pop culture. People love Daniel Craig, and Sean Connery. But when a lot of my generation think of James Bond, they'll go to Pierce Brosnan. He has the most like toned chin. He's very handsome. In my rankings out of 24, I put GoldenEye at number 10. So below The Spy Who Loved Me, but above License to Kill. Honestly, I think GoldenEye is pretty cool. You know what? Now I think about it, I'm gonna put it behind License to Kill because I really liked how going rogue was Timothy Dalton's like closing out and avenging Felix's wife. I think that was pretty cool. Let's go to my summary because honestly, I wrote a lot, like a lot. Finish GoldenEye, the 17th James Bond movie. I'm starting to think this marathon is frying my brain because I feel like I should have been more accurate and pinpointed things to say, but it's a blank canvas. So I'll just start from the top. Pierce Brosnan establishes himself as a James Bond. What did I write? Pierce Brosnan establishes himself well as a James Bond. I had heard before that he was an amalgamation of all the previous Bonds before him, but honestly, it feels like a sanded down version mixture of Timothy Dalton and Roger Moore. He has some problems with M's authority, and he seems to approach sex with the same enthusiasm as Roger Moore, doing so with a want than a need to be more effective. Sometimes his attitude reflects the cold exterior of Sean, but not enough to say that it's a noticeable ingredient. The opening song is honestly tied for the best with whatever else is up there. GoldenEye is a banger track. The opening with 006 is a great sequence, setting you up for more interactions like that, just like in Living Daylights, but they really don't do so. I think I've gotten much better in the break between movies on writing better supporting characters, because everyone does a really great job. I thought to myself multiple times, now this is acting. Natalia is a great female lead. She has so much personality and agency than you expect. Judi Dench's M is another amazing female character, and she openly mocks and scorns Bond, rightfully, for who he is, but acknowledges he is good at what he does. Xenia Onatopp and 006/Alec and Umarov are good villains. They all have different traits they bring. Xenia is a sadistic muscle-headed sex fiend. 006 is the brains and the face of Yanis. Ormov is the mover and the shaker as he gets things done with efficiency. Now for main plot itself, and the way it's told. I'm sad to say, but it's told kind of bad. I don't know. I wasn't feeling the pacing. The editing and movement of the scenes were great. All the action scenes were perfectly timed, and everything seemed good. But I felt like even more than before that they were hurrying along the very much needed intrigue and discovery that we need sneaky spy bits to get to the action. It's all about action now, which they should have toned down after the murder spree that was License to Kill. So, it is what it is. That's why I put it as. Next up is Tomorrow Never Dies, the second Pierce Brosnan film and the 1997 action film and the 18th in the James Bond series. It follows James Bond as he tries to prevent Elliot Carver, a power-mad media mogul, from engineering world events to initiate World War III. I love Tomorrow Never Dies. Tomorrow Never Dies is awesome. Let's go to my summary. Finish Tomorrow Never Dies, the 18th James Bond film. I effing loved it. This is a movie. Cinema even. I think I like it even more than Diamonds Are Forever. It's perfectly paced. Pierce as James is in full synchronization. The plot is good. Kind of modern even after all these years. I have no complaints. Hell, I even think there's still very little fat in this movie. The only major complaint I have is the amount of times James and company should be shot is too high. The villains are really stupid and are bad about that. The just effing shoot him. Why are you monologuing? You did that 4 times already, man. You have him at gunpoint. You've lost. Bro is still yapping. Is crazy. So, I like Tomorrow Never Dies a lot. In my ranking out of 24 films, I put it at number 3. So, Tomorrow Never Dies, you're going above Diamonds Are Forever. Get back there, bro. It's awesome. I still love how modern it is. I love the Bond girl. She's great. I don't recall her at this very second, but I recall very much liking her. I think she was the Asian spy lady. I think she was really, really cool. I recall that very specifically. So I want to talk about it more, but I have to keep moving on. You know, my time is running a bit short, unfortunately. Moving on, we have The War Is Not Enough, a 1999 spy film, the 19th James Bond film, third star Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. The film's plot revolves around the murder of billionaire businessman Sir Robert King by the terrorist Renard and Bond's subsequent assignment to protect the king's daughter, Electra, who was previously held ransom by Renard. During the assignment, Bond unravels a scheme to increase petroleum prices by triggering a nuclear meltdown in the waters of Istanbul. I placed The World Is Not Enough as number 15 out of 24. So it's below Octopussy. Slide that right there. Above Thunderball, but below Octopussy. So you get a C. Let's read what I wrote for it. Finished watching The World Is Not Enough, the 19th James Bond movie. The opening sequence is incredible. The opening song is a bit of a step down from Tomorrow Never Dies, in my honest opinion, as is the visual sequence. Unfortunately, everything past the opening sequence after the title drop is far less interesting than anything in its predecessors. The villains are also less interesting and very one note. The final sequence has a lot of production value, just like the opening, so that's a highlight. But yeah, the plot being, I want to control oil, I hate my dad, and M is a bit bleh. And I hate my dad and M is a bit bleh for my taste. So, I think that kind of sums it up how I feel. I don't really have more to say about it, honestly. Now, moving on. We have, and this is a big one, this is very important. We have Die Another Day. 2002 spy action film, the 20th film in the James Bond series, starring Pierce Brosnan. Okay. It is also the last film since Live and Let Die to not feature Desmond Llewellyn as Q, as he died 3 years earlier. Halle Berry co-stars as Bond girl and an NSA agent, Jinx. In the film, Bond attempts to locate a traitor in the British intelligence who betrayed him, and a British billionaire who was later revealed to be connected to a North Korean operative who Bond seemingly killed. Yeah, I changed my mind. You get put here. Let's read what I wrote for it. I'm going to write this now because how I feel will not change despite me being in the middle of watching it. This is a good, bad movie. This is 3 parts James Bond. This movie is in 3 parts. James Bond, Batman films from the 90s, and Mission Impossible, with a little bit of Metal Gear Solid. Let's start from the top. The opening sequence is once again amazing stuff. This opening song is quite not good, sorry Madonna. The opening montage is good though, kind of foreshadowing the rest of the movie. The plot itself is really good. North Korean extremists planning a war, and a disavowed James Bond for half of the movie is on the hunt for both the North Koreans and a traitor in the MI6. Now the biggest thing about this movie that's both extremely terrible and extremely amusing is the CG. It's effing dog water. Like, wow. This was cutting edge stuff at the time. It's a sight to behold. The second thing is the locations. They're amazing. Literally the Penguin's Iceberg Lounge and secret bases and so on. There's even a VR mission that James Bond does. Thirdly, the dialogue in the movie ranges from kind of bad to straight awful. Positive. I say this in a positive way. It's a one-liner every scene, and some dialogue makes 0 sense, but it's still funny. Also, everyone monologues as everyone else, and it's the worst it's ever been in terms of please effing kill someone already. They're going to escape, and they escaped. Both good and bad guys. Fourthly, Halle Berry is a wonderful Bond girl and a fun actress. She calls someone a bitch when she kills them, and is very funny. She's part of the Batman movie energy. Number 5, the special effects are wild, as is the editing. There's so much goofy effects. They tried so hard to be cutting edge. There's so many warping and slowdowns and camera speed ups, it's crazy. Number 6, I love the villains. Again, Batman energy villains. They're effing goofy. This entire movie is a big goofy excuse to spend money on stunts, special effects, cool locations, famous actors, and costume designs. I have never been more baffled and entertained. In my ranking of 24 movies, Die Another Day is number 24. It is at the bottom. This is a horrendous movie that is both very funny to watch and very bad to watch. It's a great movie to watch if you don't know anything about James Bond and are fresh off watching Batman movies. It's a horrible movie to watch if you're in the 20th movie in a James Bond movie marathon and are kind of expecting a, formula. It feels bad. It feels really, really bad. I don't understand. Moving on. We have Casino Royale, a 2006 spy thriller, the 21st film in the Eon Productions James Bond series. This is the first to star Daniel Craig as James Bond. There's no succinct summary of Casino Royale, unfortunately. But let's go through the, overall... You know what? No, I'm not even going to go to the overall plot summary. You should know what Casino Royale is, but I want to give you the quick rundown version. There's some money missing, and James has to play a high-stake game of poker, I believe they're playing. Four-card Monty? Who cares? They're gambling for a lot of money. It's really cool. It's really stylish. It's really fun. Daniel Craig opens up James Bond as a... words honestly leave me. Like, this is the movie that popularized parkour in everything, in every type of media. It's the game that helped Mirror's Edge get its identity. It's the game that gave free runners their identity. It's the movie that gave free runners their identity. It's the film that shaped a lot of media going forward, like especially in parkour based media. People love this film for that. I'm sad there's no like overall summary in the wiki, but I don't know. Let's just read what I wrote. Finished watching Casino Royale, the 21st James Bond movie. So, this is my third time watching Casino Royale, if I'm being honest. However, this is my first time. However, the first time was my introduction to James Bond proper, and the second time was a casual watch, not having much remembered as I did. This time is a much more nuanced and rich watch, as I now have all the important context for what the series turned him into, and from what he was, and from what he is in the original Ian Fleming novel. So my experience is, for all intents and purposes, brand new. This acts as a reboot for the series, so all prior James Bond history is tossed aside, except for Judi Dench's M, which makes me a bit sad as she loses her character element of disdain for Bond as a remnant of the era she would rather move on from and do her own way. However, M here still shares the same distaste for James because he proves, in a different way, that his methods are very incompatible with hers. The only difference is that she is his M, and that makes the dynamic very different as she's the one who grants him 00 status. Like always, the opening is a fabulous jump start to the kind of Bond that Daniel Craig is. I've kept saying it, but Daniel Craig's Bond is a Terminator. If he is locked onto you, he will never stop, and that is shown to the maximum here. He is brutal, a relentless, blunt instrument, as M puts it, which personally isn't my favorite mode of Bond. I like him being a competent and experienced spy, which he was for all of 2 minutes in the opening. An element I do like is his job and his coworkers at this. One element I do like is he did do this, and he did do his job, but it was his coworker who sucked at his job. The opening track, You Know My Name, is good. I like it far better than making up a song for the movie. The visuals aren't incredible per se, but they're really good. Top 5 easy for the opening, animation, cinematic. The plot itself is extremely good, and the script is tight. James is tasked with finding out who is funding terrorists, and the great process stops 2 bombs from going off in a great long scene, culminating in a long poker game, which has more elements to it than I remember, which is awesome. And the ending sequence, where James is getting tortured and his balls are getting attacked. Casino Royale has had everything, which shocked me. This is the least James Bond and the most James Bond he's ever been, because of the reboot and Daniel Craig's portrayal. He is quite honestly perfect as James when he isn't in Terminator mode and is forced to use his wits rather than his muscle. Vesper Lynn is also the best and most wonderful Bond girl in the series after 20 movies of competition. She's smart, strong, sarcastic, and is James's intellectual equal. The villains, mainly being Mads Mikkelsen as Le Chiffre, is 10 out of 10. He's incredibly subtle and unsubtle in the right places. All in all, my favorite Bond film so far in this marathon. I was unbelievably tense because I'm an adult and I know how cards work now. So that should tell you all you need to know right there. Casino Royale is my second favorite Bond film in the franchise. Like, straight up. It doesn't hit S rank, unfortunately, but it's still that good. Like, amazing, 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 amazing. So moving on, the next film in the James Bond series, Quantum of Solace. Quantum of Solace is a 2008 spy action film, second Daniel Craig, and blah 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 blah. Reading through the wiki, lots of blah blah blahs, but nothing about the plot. And I don't think I want to find a quick summary of the plot in the wiki, so I'll just move on to what I wrote. Finished watching Quantum of Solace, the 22nd James Bond movie. I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it at all. I think it's hard to call it a good or bad movie based on if you watched it in a vacuum, because this movie is built off the back of 20 other James Bond movies secretly in a way that Casino Royale tricks you into thinking it won't be. However, I want to run it down from the top. The opening and song visual, Another Way to Die, is so unbelievably peak and top tier Bond stuff that it's immediately top 3 Bond song. Alicia Keys and Jack White ultra effing killed it. The opening scene, which I have stated many times before that James Bond movies have gotten down to a science and that they are always great, is actually in question here, for 2 reasons. They wholly and totally dispense with Bond having a quiet or thoughtful or intrigue-filled scene, and the movie starts hotter than the sun, where James is in the most action, derogatory, and most tense car chase that has an unbelievable amount of collateral damage. As the car chase ends, it is revealed that the gentleman from the end of Casino Royale that James stuffed in his trunk and is taken to MI6 for questions, making this the first James Bond film that is made hot off the heels of the last one, and picks up immediately where Casino Royale left off. Following that, they hype up how mysterious the shadow organization is, Spectre, and he escapes and isn't visually seen for the rest of the movie. After that, the film's pacing is really fast and gets James to the from point to point to point in rapid succession with action dotted along the way that is more over the top than you suspect. My problems start here that the film has no real want of slowing down and letting its scenes breathe or have characters we're following, besides Judi Dench as M, really engage with their jobs. It's just action with no fluff on the side. It feels up to that point. The vibe goes back to James Bond as a spy, and the movie instantly improves. He's doing his job, and he's doing it well. He just really turns off the Terminator and goes back to being James Bond the spy, along with quality political intrigue that paints all governments as kind of shitty, which I like, rather than just beating on the Americans or anyone else. It stays in that mode for a good while until the film gets bored with itself and goes back to action, and by that point, the film was basically around its climax and its ending. As and after I finished, I could tell that this movie was a poor copy of Diamonds Are Forever with a dash of Goldfinger and A License to Kill. The reason the film felt so odd is because it's secretly a revenge story and James is out for blood, but they don't paint him as bloodthirsty as he is in Diamonds, despite being so full of action. He basically goes rogue, but not really, and that's where the problem lies. They want to do Diamonds, but the James they wrote shines the best when he isn't doing that. It's when he's doing his job. It's a film equal parts good and bad scenes. So, I summed it up perfectly there. By the 20th film, I really have my thoughts nailed down packed. I started getting into paragraphs long for some reason. So I placed Quantum of Solace in number 11 out of 24, just below GoldenEye. So grab this, GoldenEye, slightly above From Russia with Love for some reason. I just really like the more modern Bond films. They speak to me. Moving on, we have the indescribable, the amazing, the coolest James Bond film, Skyfall, a 2012 spy film and the 23rd in James Bond series produced by Eon Productions, the 3rd Daniel Craig film. Yeah, they don't have a plot summary, but in my own words, Skyfall is the best James Bond film. It is the best James Bond film, bar none, like unbelievably peak, S tier. And I'm going to give a summary of the plot, and I'm not going to BS it. The plot takes place after every single James Bond film, secretly. They don't tell you that, but it takes place at the end of the timeline. This is the newest James Bond film, whereas Casino Royale was a soft reboot and is the first James Bond novel and is the first James Bond, in the timeline. Quantum of Solace takes place immediately after that, so, technically the second in timeline. Skyfall, at the end of the timeline, after every single one of his adventures, they all happened. They're all canon. They all didn't get rebooted into hell and, destroyed. They're all canon, which I love. The plot of Skyfall is that the world is modern now. It doesn't need James Bond. He's an outdated relic. He's even more outdated than in what they felt in previous films, like Tomorrow Never Dies. You know, he is nothing. You are no more. And the film opens up with Moneypenny accidentally shooting James Bond off a train during mid-mission on M's orders. And eventually he comes back pissed. And he doesn't want to, but he only comes back because he fights for Queen and Country. You know, he's loyal above everything else. And the film goes through great lengths to show that James Bond is old. You know, M is basically out the door. She's about to retire. Q is, you know, old Q retired in the series canon. And, you know, new Q is younger than James, younger than M, younger than anybody, even younger than Moneypenny. He seems to be about 23, 24. He's not a old man. He's a young guy. And in the film, M has this great line that she will not leave this organization worse than she started when she is asked, you know, retire with dignity. She's like, no, to hell with that. To hell with dignity. Skyfall is a wonderful film. And unfortunately, I wasn't in the right state of mind after watching it. I really wasn't. It's unfortunate. But here's what I wrote. Finish Skyfall, the 23rd James Bond movie. I cried no less than 4 times, and I screamed at the top of my lungs 3 times. So, I don't know what more needs to be said. I was over the moon. It was crazy. It was crazy. I have seen Skyfall like 4 times, but it's been years since I last seen it. But this rewatch, it broke me. You know, the culmination of all the other movies leading up to this point, the movie saying that every single movie you watched was valid and canon. Your time was not wasted. You know, even though we rebooted the series with Casino Royale, and you know, we kind of, you know, threw away what you felt like was James Bond up to that point. We know we always reboot James Bond every few years. You know, give him a new look, new story. But Skyfall says all that mattered, all that was important, and it has a wonderful plot to boot. It's the sending off of M. It's the birth of a new M. You know, it's a revival of James Bond after, you know, going through a troubled time and rekindling his past, you know, going through a whole adventure, trying to justify his existence and the existence of his coworkers and his, you know, company and his job. I felt so emotionally drained. I needed to go take a walk afterwards. I had to talk to my mom, hug my dog. I don't have a dog. You know, walk around a little bit. It was crazy. So, moving on, we have Spectre, the last of the series. I'm not going to read the summary. It's the 24th of 25 James Bond films. Here's what I wrote. I finished the last movie of the James Bond 2007 movie collection, Spectre, the 24th James Bond film. It's pretty good still. The opening was fantastic, and it's still probably my favorite James Bond opening in the whole series. A single camera cut with following James over Dia de los Muertos parade to his kill shot is so unbelievably sick. The opening track and graphics are pretty good too. Writings on the wall sets you up to be an extremely emotional film and leads you to think it'll be exactly like Skyfall, but it's not quite there, and it's not quite as powerful as Skyfall by Adele. However, it's still an amazing track, top 10 easy. The plot being the setting up of Spectre as this unbelievable threat with eyes everywhere, and the growing push to make 007 obsolete gives the entire movie a sense of urgency that makes it wonderfully tense. Lea Seydoux as Madeline Swan is absolutely top tier Bond girl. I'm a big fan of hers, and I enjoy how cold her glares are. Her facial expressions are so visceral. Blofeld and Batista as villains are pretty cool, and they're very fun. It's a shame I think they're both underused and overused. Blofeld, let me try that again. I think they both underused and overused Blofeld, except his opening scene, which is undoubtedly the most sinister and scary a Bond villain has ever been. If they kept up that intrigue, we would have been so unbelievably back. Batista as a Jaws-like character is very much to my liking. I wish he had more charm and goof to him, but it is what it is, as he is about 40% Terminator and 60% strong goon, whereas James gets a Terminator boost at the end like he has 2 movies ago. Overall, it's like a few steps below cinema, but I think at the time of release in 2015, Daniel Craig's James Bond one was batting 3 out of 4 bangers, and that's extremely good. So, on my list, I put Spectre in the same spot as Moonraker. So, Spectre and Moonraker share the 5th spot. There's no 6th spot. So, I'm confident in putting Spectre above Moonraker. That's easy. And for the last film, No Time to Die, it wasn't on the movie collection. I only have my memories to go off of, so we're just going to free ball this one. It's the 25th James Bond film, and it is the end of the Daniel Craig timeline, where, he's once again tasked with stopping a crazy terrorist. Lea Seydoux returns. There's a big intrigue, and the ending is cathartic for the James Bond series. It's the first time James Bond doesn't make it out of the film. But at the end of the film, they still state James Bond will return. How I feel about it as of sitting down right now, I think it's as good as Casino Royale. Quite simply. Maybe I'll return one day with a video dedicated to just that. But for now, I'm going to put it there. I have no thoughts because it wasn't unfortunately part of the collection. And that's where my thoughts were kind of coalesced. I think the series peaked at Skyfall, and it had a dramatic conclusion at Spectre. No Time to Die doesn't factor into this as much as the others because there's no proper follow-up to it at the moment, so all we can do is just sit with it right now. But that's how I feel. So we did it. Yay. This is our quintessential James Bond ranking. And just for funsies, I'm going to read out my list as it appears on my phone. So at number 1, Skyfall. Best James Bond film. At number 2, Casino Royale. At number 3, Tomorrow Never Dies. At number 4, Diamonds Are Forever. At number 5, Moonraker. At also number 5, shares a spot with Moonraker, Spectre. At number 7, we have License to Kill. At number 8, we have Rush with Love. At number 9, we have Spy Who Loved Me. At number 10, we have GoldenEye. At number 11, we have Quantum of Solace. At number 12, we have Live and Let Die. At number 13, we have Dr. No. At number 14, we have Octopussy. At number 15, we have The World Is Not Enough. At number 16, we have Thunderball. At number 17, we have The Living Daylights. At number 18, we have For Your Eyes Only. At number 19, we have Goldfinger. At number 20, we have View to Kill. At number 21, we have You'll Only Live Twice. At number 22, we have The Man with the Golden Gun. At number 23, we have On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And at number 24, as the worst James Bond movie, we have Die Another Day. So, that's it. We did it. We got all the James Bond films. Overall, I think the James Bond films are wonderful movies. I think if you have an expert on your side or someone who's seen them all, it'd be good to have them curate what you're going to watch rather than, just freeball it like I did. I did it for education and I did it out of love. But for people who aren't wholly interested in James, I think they should have a curated list. I don't think they should, go online and trust people like IGN or whatever. And I don't think they should trust my list. But I do think from, numbers 1 through 10, I think there are some bangers that everyone can agree on. Like, yeah, this is a great film. Please watch it. Casino Royale, Skyfall, Diamonds from Russia. I think these are all pretty quintessential. GoldenEye. I don't think anyone's going to turn their nose up at me saying like, hey, these should be in the front runner spots for if you watch this series, right? But yes, my throat hurts. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next Too Late for Me gaming tea shop coffee talk, whatever this podcast series is called. I'll see you all next time. Bye.